Welcome to Tech Bytes and News, your personal generative AI podcast. So, IP addresses, huh? A topic as exciting as watching paint dry, right? But Jeff Houston's January 2025 ISP column? It's a wild ride, believe it or not. We're talking IPv4 exhaustion, the surprisingly slow IPv6 adoption, and the bizarre world of IP address trading.
Oh boy. IP addresses. Thrilling. So, the big picture. Is IPv4 actually dying, or is it just, clinging to life with the help of gnats?
Yeah, exactly. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Huston points out that, back in '92, the IETF predicted the massive growth of connected devices. They even saw this coming. IPv6 was designed to handle it all, by giving every device its own unique public address.
Right, but IPv6 is not exactly taking off like a rocket, is it?
Nope. It's more like a really slow, slightly sputtering firework. The shift to client/server architecture and NATs has kept IPv4 afloat much longer than anyone expected. Now, NATs let tons of devices share a smaller pool of public addresses. It's a total hack.
A brilliant, messy hack. So what's the problem then? If NATs are working, why the fuss over IPv6?
Even NATs have their limits. They're not infinitely elastic. As device numbers keep exploding, we're starting to see the strain. Houston predicts two possibilities: a fragmented IPv4 internet, or a gradual, reluctant move to IPv6.
Fragmented internet? Sounds terrifying, I see. Like, different parts of the internet only talking to specific servers, right? Imagine the chaos.
Precisely. And that's where the address allocation data comes in. Huston analyzes the numbers from 2024. In 2023, for the first time ever, the total IPv4 allocated address pool actually shrunk. Then in 2024, it went back up a bit. He explains this, discussing the difference between allocated and assigned addresses. It's a bit of a technicality, but basically, he simplifies it by just using allocated for both.
Got it. So the total number of addresses isn't the whole story. What about the actual use of the addresses?
Exactly. That's why he looks at the advertised addresses, the ones actually used in routing. He also looks at the unadvertised addresses, essentially those unused or maybe hoarded. The interplay between these numbers paints a fascinating picture. Then, he dives into the world of IPv4 address transfers, basically buying and selling addresses. It's a crazy market.
Wait, you can buy and sell IP addresses? That's unexpected. What's driving that market?
Well, the scarcity of IPv4 addresses, of course. The price of IPv4 addresses has fluctuated wildly, reflecting the uncertainty around IPv6 adoption there. There are some interesting graphs showing this. It's a complex interplay of supply, demand, and speculation.
So are these transfers helping to recycle unused addresses? Is the market working as intended?
That's a great question. And the answer is, it's complicated. Huston examines the age of transferred addresses. Many were allocated years ago, suggesting that the market isn't necessarily freeing up a massive pool of unused addresses. There's hoarding involved. The market isn't perfect. It's not efficiently dredging up unused addresses.
I see. So it's not a perfectly efficient market. What about fragmentation? Are these transfers breaking up larger address blocks into smaller, less useful ones?
It does happen, but it's not a major problem. Only about 5% of allocated prefixes are fragmented by transfers. But it's a factor. Then it gets into the international flow of address transfers, showing which countries are buying and selling the most. Very interesting geographical patterns emerge.
Wow, this is way more interesting than I thought it would be. What about IPv6? Is it finally gaining some traction?
Yes and no. The number of IPv6 allocations is increasing, but the actual volume of addresses allocated is quite variable. He points out that the way IPv6 addresses are allocated makes direct comparisons tricky, as different providers use different sized prefixes.
So it's a bit of a mess on that front too. What's the overall outlook for the internet then? Is there a clear winner between IPv4 and IPv6?
There's still a lot of uncertainty. The transition is slow, and NATs are still playing a huge role. Huston notes that while some service providers are seeing the writing on the wall and moving towards IPv6, Many others seem content to stick with IPv4 and NATs for the foreseeable future. The growth of IPv6 is uneven across the globe, with some regions showing much faster adoption than others.
So it's still a waiting game. A long, slow, slightly frustrating waiting game. Thanks for summarizing all this.
You're welcome. And that's it for this episode of Tech Bites and News. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye!
Bye-bye.